And we're back for a third hour of American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers.
And I'm Bob Sellers. We are joined today by our family of co-hosts, Republican strategist and attorney Amanda Mackey, and attorney and GOP strategist Ameer Benno, and the CEO of Fair Rock Strategies, Christina Antello. So we just spoke with Steve Hecht, who has written a column called "Georgia is the Only Path to the Constitution's Survival." Hecht says individual liberties are threatened if the Georgia Senate race goes to the Democrats and flips the balance of power. One of the candidates, Jon Ossoff, has said that he is in favor of adding more judges to the Supreme Court, stacking the court in the Democrats' favor. Is Georgia that critical? So, Amanda, I'll start with you. How important is Georgia? I'm so sorry to say this. We're having an audio problem with you. So,
sorry, I was on mute.
Go ahead.
That it couldn't be more important because the stakes are so high. Should President Trump be not able to prevail in the lawsuits and in the Electoral College through the joint session on January 6th, you really are leaving the entire government to one party. And I think that the Georgians are going to want a check and balance on their government. They're independently minded. And Ossoff and Warnock are certainly not in the ilk of a Jimmy Carter, a peanut farmer who's a small business owner. These are radicals in the ilk of AOC and Rashida Tlaib, to the left of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, and I love anybody that uses the word ilk. So let's go to Christina. Christina, is this an overstatement?
Yes, absolutely. It's a vast overstatement, to say the least. They are not radicals. They are not to the left of Bernie Sanders. That is absurd. They are Democrats. So, yes, they do believe in probably a more progressive stance than what she might be used to. But certainly they are pragmatic, and they are business-friendly Democrats that are willing to get to work here in D.C. And looking for that opportunity. But above that, I think also kind of just even stating, there have been many times in our history, our constitutional, democratically elected history, where there has been one-party control in both houses of Congress and the White House, and we have survived just fine. And so to say that there are, yes, I admit there are some radical liberals on our side. There's about 5 of them, but you need 218 in the House to pass legislation and 60 in the Senate to get things done, and that's just not enough on the numbers to change anything too radically. So we will survive one-party rule should it happen.
Yeah, Ameer, I personally think saying we lose the Constitution, I went to college and learned all about it as a government major at the University of Virginia, and I believe wholly in it, but it is a living document. So people do worry about the people associated with it, whether it be followed. And it is true, though, isn't it, Ameer, you're our lawyer here, that you can change the size of the Supreme Court?
Well, to the extent that what you're saying, Bob, that it's not in the Constitution, the size of the Supreme Court, you're 100% correct. The Supreme Court has had 9 justices since the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. And there is something to that number, and it's not just arbitrarily chosen. Now, yes, it has expanded in years before that, generally as we pushed it west and we expanded the size of our territory as a nation. But we have never, in the history of the United States, decided on the number of Supreme Court justices based on political dogma and doctrine and ideology.
Let me throw something at you. From my reading of history, and maybe I'm wrong because you're the lawyer here, but I thought even Abraham Lincoln was trying to expand the court because he was getting pushback because he was against slavery, and he actually had a pro-slavery Supreme Court, so he wanted to add more justices that would uphold the Union side. Am I wrong on that?
Well, I can't speak to Abraham Lincoln about that. I'm not familiar with whether that was something.
Well, you said in American history that's why. That's the only reason I threw it out.
Well, I'm talking about we've never decided the number of justices on the court, actually placed justices there based on your political ideology, saying, look, we don't like how the 9 justices on the currently constituted Supreme Court are ruling on any number of issues. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to add more justices who are of a political alignment with the Democrat Party or a political faction of the Democrat Party in order to counterbalance or outweigh or outvote the other justices. That has never been done before. That is what FDR was trying to do in 1936, and that was defeated. But it was defeated in that we couldn't get the popular support. But he won in the sense that all of his New Deal legislation ended up suddenly getting approved by the Supreme Court, which prior to his threat to pack the court had found that legislation unconstitutional. So there is precedent for the Supreme Court being intimidated, which I think is what happened here in the Texas case. It was intimidated, but we've never seen the number of justices on our high court decided by political affiliation.
Yeah, and we all know, Heather, that elections have consequences, as President Obama said at the time, and then President Trump has used that himself when he has tried to undo some of those policies. But a lot of people feel that if the Democrats have control of the Senate as well as the House, that this really could change the direction of the country.
Well, I mean, you can take a look specifically at one of the candidates in Georgia. Since we were talking about Georgia, one of the Senate candidates there, John Ossoff, Democrat, has flat out said on camera that he is for packing the court. So I was going to actually ask Christina about that. I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think that you should pack the court?
I don't. And I don't think that Joe Biden does either. And I don't think that a majority of the Democrats in the House and the Senate believe that either. And so while it's a fun parlor game to sit around and talk about, and it's something to hypothesize of a potential strategy or what they could do or what they could consider, I don't think there are the votes to get it done. And I'm more worried about what we can actually get done and get passed. And I'd rather spend the first 100 days worrying about how we get back from this coronavirus and get our economy going instead of hypothesizing about things that won't happen.
I like the name parlor game. That's what we should call this show, the parlor game, because that's what we're doing. We're sitting here talking. So, Amanda, to wrap it up for us as far as what's going on in Georgia, what do you think the consequences there will be?
I think that, both sides are going to do their best to bring forward all the people that they can to make sure that they can vote. I think what the Democrats have said, at least Andrew Yang, who was a former Democrat presidential candidate, has told people to move to Georgia. So there is significant concern with potential fraud that could happen in the state of Georgia. I, in full disclosure, will be going to Georgia as a volunteer for the NRSC. And so we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. But look, there is so much riding on this, and control of the Senate potentially rests with the tie-breaking vote. Kamala Harris, who is the most progressive senator in the United States Senate. And so there's a lot riding on this. I mean, if people are worried about defunding the police, which is happening all across the country, Medicare for all, packing the courts, as we've been talking about, which is something that has been widely discussed among Democrats, and they don't like to say that they would support it. They dodge on it, but certainly that's something that they're looking at. DC statehood and all those parade of horribles that we've been hearing about over and over in the past year, those become very real things that can happen should the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the White House.
All right. Thank you very much. And we will be back with more of American Agenda. We've got a lot more to talk about on the parlor game.
And welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers along with Bob Sellers. Election experts are saying that Vice President Mike Pence could go rogue when Congress counts the electoral votes on January 6th. Some conservatives argue that the vice president has unique powers to actually reject state election results. A professor at Ohio State University said this. He said there's talk the Congress is supposed to sit in judgment of whether the states conducted their elections legally. Now, it's been suggested, as we just said, that Mike Pence, in fact, has a unilateral authority to reject whole slates of electors based on language in the 12th Amendment. So could Pence go rogue, and is that true? And so I will toss it over to our attorney who is on board. What do you think?
Hi, Heather.
Hi.
I don't think so. I don't think that there's anything in the 12th Amendment that gives the president of the Senate, which would be the sitting vice president, or Mike Pence in this instance, that kind of power, nor is there anything in the congressional statute, the Electoral Count Act, which was passed in 1876 or 1877, I think it's 1877, that would do so. In fact, that statute is very clear that it's a ministerial role that the presiding officer in the Senate would play, in this case, Mike Pence. His job would only be to open the envelopes with the certificates. Then he would hand them to these designated individuals who are called tellers, who would then call out what the vote is and count them. And then after they've counted them, they would return back to the vice president, who would then announce what the vote is. Now, if at any point in time you have a congressman and a senator who object to either one or more electoral votes, then they have to recess and they have to go back to their respective chambers, deliberate for 2 hours, and vote on that objection.
And that's a question, though. I mean, and that's what we were just discussing in the break. What happens then if, because there are reports that there are some senators, at least 3, that are considering coming on board with, we already know the documented congressmen that are going to object. If they go out, they deliberate for 2 hours, they come back in and they decide to reject the electors, then what?
Well, if you have a simple majority in either house that agrees to reject the electors, and you'll need a majority in both houses in order to do it, then Mike Pence's role would simply be to sustain that objection, and those electors would be struck. So those electors would not count. Now, that would not change the fact that you would still need to get 270 electors in the majority. This is what the 12th Amendment talks about, that you need a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, which would be 270. So if you strike enough electors to bring Joe Biden down from his presumptive 306 to under 270, then neither candidate would have that majority. And under the 12th Amendment, it would then go to the House of Representatives for a vote by each state would get 1 vote. And that's what the 12th Amendment prescribes to happen in that circumstance.
Amanda, as our Republican strategist, do you think that this is a wise strategy?
So I would just say that, really, I think this is more in the hands of House members and Senate members. Heather, you mentioned a couple of senators. I know Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, Rand Paul. There's been open discussion about this. And, as someone who worked on Capitol Hill for over a decade, I would just say that there certainly is a lot to be said about what your constituents want. And if your constituents are coming to you and calling your office and seeing you over the holidays, they're going to be filling your ear with exactly how they feel. And this certainly is a divisive issue. So I think let's wait and see what happens when members of Congress come back from their Christmas recess and see what their temperature is. But I really think that this falls with House members. Of course, we know Mo Brooks of Alabama has taken a stance on this. But if a senator does, as we discussed, there's a procedure, a simple majority. And basically, I think it's really more unclear what happens after that, only because it's never happened. The last time this happened was in 2004 when Barbara Boxer and a House member from Ohio objected to this. Okay. So really, we don't have any precedent with this. So some say this will go back to the governors to actually decide.
Yeah.
So let's wait.
Yeah, let me get Christina in here, though. Christina, what role should the Democrats be playing, if any, in trying to restore faith in our election system while all this is going on?
I think the Democrats are doing exactly what they can. You see President-elect Biden, and I say that purposely, President-elect Biden, who's got the majority of the popular vote and who has now won the Electoral College with over 306 votes. Is trying to project his leadership, a steady leadership, a calculated leadership, and determined. And I'm finally now relieved to see Senator McConnell, who, I might be a Democrat, but I can respect that he is the shrewdest and probably savviest senator in that United States body. And now he has finally said that this is the president-elect and that he is discouraging his members from partaking in this, as it is ripping away at the core of our foundations. And so I recognize that some folks may not be happy with how this has turned out, but this is the will of the people with 78 million votes. And this is and he's won the majority of the states, and he's won the electoral college, and we need to settle in now.
Do you think that President-elect Biden will be treated the same way that President Trump was treated the 4 years of his administration, and his administration will be constantly called into question as a result of this? Or do you think the media and the loudest voices will just try to get everyone to be quiet?
I think it certainly is possible. I mean, it has been a terrible 4 years, in my opinion. I feel like we have been tearing at each other from both sides, and both parties play a role in that, absolutely. And I'm fearful that we'll spend another 4 years doing it, and then another 4 years doing it again. I feel like in this pandemic, this was really a moment where there's an actual enemy for us all to unite against, and we haven't been able to do that. And so I hope that it won't be the case, but it certainly is possible, probably likely. So yes, I'm still just as nervous about that.
Yeah. What do you think, Bob?
I think the Electoral College is the kind of the last place that actually any decision making. The way the founders set it up is if people made a bad decision, the Electoral College members would actually decide, they don't know enough to make that decision. It's kind of obsolete. Because people know what's going on now, and then over 30 states now require them to vote as their states voted. And January 6th, we may see some fireworks, but I think the end is
It's been a good history lesson, though. We've learned a lot about government.
Well,
Don't you think?
Comes in handy this year, especially.
Absolutely.
That's why we have Ameer here also.
Well, we're going to get back to our... Go ahead, Ameer.
No, I was going to say that every single time that there have been objections to a slate of electors, it has been from the Democrats. It hasn't been from the Republicans. Starting back in 1877 to 1969 to 2001 to 2005. And when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, the Democrats did it again. Republicans haven't objected. So this is the law. This is the Electoral Count Act that Congress passed. It provides for this contingency. So there's the Democrats didn't cry foul when they did it all those times. Nobody said it was a coup when they did it those times. So for the Republicans to be doing it this time, they shouldn't have any, they shouldn't have any
they have the right to go through the process. I think that's where we're going through the process, Ameer. I think you're right. I think the only question now some people have, was there fraud? Do we examine that? Could that change things here? That's news that we're following, but the process we've been following, and he is president-elect, just so you know, Christina, we are referring to him as President-elect Biden. All right, we'll talk more in just a few moments. Also, this time that we remind you about our app, back in the day when you... All right, welcome back to American Agenda, and we have our panel here with us. Also wanted to dip in right now, Ron Johnson, the senator, talking on Capitol Hill. They are debating the stimulus package, the relief plan. As we understand it, we talked to Larry Kudlow yesterday. It would include a stimulus check to individuals up to $2,400 per family. That still could be debated. There also may be the issue, we know that as far as how much money state and local governments might get. We understand that most things have been put aside, most things have been settled on. Then late in the day, there was somebody that objected to what the Federal Reserve was doing as far as making money available too easily to businesses. We just wanted to let you know that's going on. And if something happens, we actually get a bill that becomes a law, we'll let you know. Meanwhile, let's bring back our folks and talk about how we're seeing an increase of people who are pushing back against numerous lockdowns and closures across the country. For instance, on Staten Island, we had a bar owner who even drove into a deputy who was trying to arrest him for opening his bar against the new COVID rules. And we have seen other business owners ranting about the loss of their livelihoods. And with the vaccine now available and another on the way, a lot of people are saying, okay, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. can you stop wrecking our economy by forcing us to shut down? And this is very much a frustration, Heather, that you and I talk to people every day here about that.
Yeah, I mean, in California specifically, they're under what we would call an extreme lockdown, also a mask mandate. But California today, these are the numbers I was looking for earlier, 52,000 new cases of COVID with their extreme lockdown underway. So that, begs the question, do they work or do they not work?
Yeah, I mean, Christina, that's the problem is everybody understood back in March that we didn't know much about this thing. We didn't know how deadly, we didn't know how to do, so we essentially shut down the economy. But now we're so far into this, it seems like certain people are getting hit and losing their businesses while others are succeeding, like the big box stores are going on about their merry little business, and small restaurant owners, that sort of thing, they're getting hammered, and a lot of people are getting fed up.
I agree with you 100%. And if everybody would just do the things that we've been told we need to do, wear a mask and keep socially distanced. And I know some of your viewers will write me afterwards and be like, masks don't work. And actually they do. They do work. It's a little disingenuous to talk about California with the 54,000 cases today and say, well, now they have the lockdown. Obviously, it's been 3 or 4 weeks in the making to get to this number today with the hospitalizations, because as we know, there's a ramp up time with the illness. So this is probably more of the surge following Thanksgiving than it is anything that's reactions from today. The lockdowns, I disagree with. I'm with you. I think it's hypocritical when these folks say they're going to lock something down and then they go out to lunch, and that's not fair. I'm with you 100%. I want our economy open because it may surprise you. As a Democrat, I am also a capitalist, and I want to see our economy work and the market work and all of those things. And I'm a small business owner as well. I agree. I'm with you. But let's then keep the economy open, but wear our mask and stay socially distanced and do the things, again, that we know we need to do, and not have little parties at our houses and spread it in small groups and take our masks off in different locations and not be worried about our neighbors and our families and friends.
Yeah, Amanda, I used to think there are two types of people, those with kids and those without kids. Now I think there are people who have owned businesses and those who have never owned businesses. And a lot of these things, these rules are getting passed, I think, by people who have never owned a business and don't understand that it's not an 8 to 5 job. It's 24/7. It is your life.
That's right. I mean, these are businesses that, for 4 or 5 decades, they could have been passed down from generation to generation. These are built from the ground up, and they're being destroyed. Just look at how many businesses have closed on Yelp. That's a really good indication, tens of thousands. And so it's very unfortunate what's happening. I fear what a Biden administration potentially could do on this and really institute lockdowns. But this is exactly why Gavin Newsom and the hypocrites really in the Democratic Party, their mayors, Senator Feinstein, it seems very heavily tilted in the state of California. How many of their mayors and their governor have really been hypocrites about this? Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, that's so true.
And so right now what you're seeing is the 6th recall effort against Gavin Newsom. And, the recall effort really isn't all that challenging. They need to get about 1.5 million signatures, which is 12% of the 2018 number of voters. And basically from there, they can file for removing Gavin Newsom. And I think at the point at which we are right now, where business owners are getting crushed, especially in California, and being in Florida, this is where they're coming to, Florida and Texas. You can understand.
And they're going to Austin and Nashville, 2 states without state income taxes. So, there are a lot of reasons to go there. I'm wondering, Ameer, we're seeing more and more people rebel against this. And I don't want to see anybody arrested for civil disobedience, especially they're just trying to survive. What are the legal ramifications with people that just say, I'm sorry, but I got to keep my restaurant open?
Well, I mean, at the most basic level, it would be loss of a liquor license or any of your state licenses.
And that's a killer right there.
That's a killer. It's a killer. And, this is what's so frustrating to so many people is that statistically speaking, we shouldn't be talking about the number of cases of COVID. We should be talking about, well, what's the rate of ICU hospitalizations? Right. Are they Are they at capacity? Are they not at capacity? How many people are on ventilators? How many people aren't? And we're not seeing anywhere near the amount that we were seeing back in April. And we see a rate of transmission, they say, in restaurants that's beneath 1%, yet they're shutting them down. And that's what's frustrating people. And then you rub salt in the wounds with people like Gavin Newsom, people like Nancy Pelosi, use media like Chris Cuomo, who say, these are the rules for you, but not for us. It's frustrating. And then we see the elite class, the political class, God forbid their Christmas recess, the federal government workers, that there should be a government shutdown. We can't shut down government,
right?
But government can shut down small business, no problem. They have no problem with doing that. That galls me. And it galls a lot of Americans.
Yeah, I think you're right. And even Christina, reflects that this goes across both sides of the aisle. There are a lot of people that feel that this has gone too far, and a lot of people penalized. We're going to take a break here, come back with more of American Agenda. Among the things we want to talk about is there's a suggestion that on birth certificates, they no longer put your sex. Really? We'll be back with more.
And welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers along with Bob Sellers. The much respected New England Journal of Medicine has published an article declaring that sexual identities should not be printed on birth certificates. The sex of the baby should not be listed anymore. Why, you would ask? Well, it says because of the particularly harmful effects of such designations on, quote, intersex and transgender people. So are we ready to erase the entire concept of boys and girls? Christina, what do you think about this move?
I've been thinking about this one for a little while as I prepared to talk with you guys today. And my honest answer is I just don't care. Like, if you're about freedom, why do you care what's on my birth certificate? And if you're about freedom, why do you care what happens in my bedroom? And it's just one of those things where this is not an important issue to me. I feel like everybody should do what they feel like they need to do within the confines of the Constitution and within the law. And if you're not breaking the law, have at it. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your life.
Amanda, do you agree? Do you think that this doesn't impact anyone else or impact society as a whole?
It actually does. So I disagree, because you have to, make sure that you have accurate records, and that record keeping for the government is very important. So the accuracy of those records, I think, is of paramount importance. And I really don't see why you wouldn't want to have the sex of a child on their birth certificate. That doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't pass the laugh test. And for the New England Journal of Medicine, I have been a healthcare attorney for many, many years, and they are the gold standard. And it's surprising that they would take this approach and take this stance.
Yeah. So, well, as a healthcare attorney, just to continue with that, I mean, what about you're born a boy or a girl in terms of moving forward with any type of medical procedures that you have to have, that type of thing? I mean, that alone seems like would be a reason to have it on your birth certificate.
I think it's of paramount importance. I mean, when you go to apply for health insurance, they ask if you are a male or a female, because even your benefits are designed differently for men and women. So it's just something that doesn't really add up for me. I don't see why having your sex on a birth certificate is an issue. So I look at this differently as what someone does in their bedroom. This has nothing to do with that. This is actually vital records that are maintained by the state and local governments, and that's really important to preserve. It's really important that we have those to be accurate. Just think of crimes that could occur. I mean, you want to be able to identify who could have potentially committed a crime. There is a difference between a man and a woman, and you want to be able to identify that, and you rely on government records for that.
Amir, just legally, why do you think that they're suggesting this move be made?
Because they're caving into the woke left. That's the only reason why. Why would a previously respected scientific journal that's supposed to be based on objective data and science now put out something under the guise of a medical study that's so patently politically slanted? Do you think that they would have published an article if it had come out the other way saying you need to have the gender or the sex listed on the birth certificate or on a driver's license or on any other government document? Of course they wouldn't. Why is there this push to erase the difference between men and women, boys and girls? What are you going to do if there's a crime committed? Are you going to put this individual who may be biologically female in a male prison or vice versa? The host of issues that comes out from this, both legally, security-wise, just across the spectrum of different things we'll encounter is just mind-blowing. And this is what I want to just tie this back to COVID. Is it any question? Is this is perfect explanation for why people are critical of science? You know, they say wear a mask. Great, I agree, you should wear a mask. But do you think people are skeptical of science when they come out and say, well, it doesn't matter whether you're a boy or a girl? We believe in science. We believe in data. You know, you should do that when it comes to COVID. But we don't have to do that when it comes to biology or physiology. Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So wokeness trumps science, Bob.
Yeah, my wife is a teacher, and she teaches in Arlington Public Schools. She's not allowed to use the term boys or girls, referring to her kids as she's teaching, which is kind of odd. That's where we are now. But she also, in her career, has also taught sex education. And I'm sure that Amanda can attest, there are primary sexual characteristics that help identify whether someone is male and female. Now, if there's anything else as people grow up, and I agree with Christina, whatever somebody wants to do, that's fine. But there also need to be, for health reasons, if nothing else, you have to be able to identify you'll identify whether the baby is born with all arms and legs and all that, and what other characteristics it might have. That's information that's fairly important down the road.
Yeah, they're trying to, in means of an explanation, it's kind of above the line or below the line and where certain information lies. I think right now we want to go to the vice president, just to interrupt this conversation momentarily, where he is talking about the 1-year anniversary of the Space Force. Should we listen briefly to hear what he has to say? Let's pause for just a moment and listen.
Many kind things have been said about your vice president, but I have to tell you, I am the second biggest champion of the Space Force in this administration. So as we begin, allow me to bring greetings and first anniversary congratulations from a champion of everyone who wears the uniform of the United States and the founder of the United States Space Force. I bring greetings and congratulations from the 45th President of the United States, President Donald Trump. We just left the Oval Office with the President, and from the very first moment that he conceived of the idea of creating a new branch of our armed forces dedicated to our security in space, he has been an enthusiast, and I can testify, as the acting secretary and the Secretary of the Air Force can attest, that enthusiasm has only grown in the last year, and he's proud of each and every one of you, as I am. But we're grateful to the contributions of all of you in this room and to the speakers who have preceded me at this podium for bringing us to the fruition of this first year, but more importantly, bringing us to this day, a year ago Sunday, that saw the creation of the first new branch of our armed forces in more than 70 years. And there are members of Congress who are with us today who I remember in those critical moments in the legislative process who were absolutely indispensable. And I'd like you to join me in thanking Congressman Doug Lamburn for your great leadership on behalf of our Space Force. And the first person ever to mention to me that we ought to restart the National Space Council, even before I had this job. He is one of the greatest champions of American leadership in space in the Congress of the United States, Congressman Brian Babin. Thank you. And I want to give particular note to a member of the United States Senate.
And there he is, some words from the Vice President there as we celebrate the 1-year anniversary. It's hard to believe it's been 1 year, Bob, of the Space Force, and it's definitely come a long way. Very excited to talk about it. And obviously, Vice President Pence is doing well after getting the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, seems to be doing fine. And that insignia, I don't know if we can show it again, but certainly like the original Federation Star Trek emblem. Not that I would know that, but it does look very similar.
Yeah,
if
there's
you've
a
seen
fan there somewhere, I think. Somewhere.
All right, we will be back with more of American Agenda after this. Back to American Agenda. Bob Sellers here with Heather Childers and our panel. The COVID-19 vaccines will come with a so-called vaccination card. Health officials say the card is merely to keep track of when you got the shot, but others warn it could be used down the road to keep track of people. Now, maybe this is extreme, but kind of like the Nazi Germany show us your papers kind of thing. In fact, the Center for Global Government says it's important to have some way of verifying whether someone has the vaccine shot or not. A spokesman said, quote, there would be gatekeepers at different places at your workplace or a stadium to watch a basketball game, end quote, to check for the vaccine cards. The spokesman said it was needed for the public good. Is this allowed? Is it, Ameer, I assume they can do this?
Well, that is a gray area, Bob, whether employers can do this. This is certainly an order of magnitude different than saying you have to keep social distance or you need to wear a mask.
Yeah.
This is saying you need to inject yourself with a pathogen. So it's something I believe the EEOC is going to issue some guidance on. I don't think that it has issued that guidance on it yet. There's going to have to be some accommodation made for people under the Americans with Disability Act, under Title VII. There may be religious exemptions. There may be people whose faith prohibits them from taking the vaccine. There may be people who have medical conditions for which they should not take this vaccine, and employers would have to provide them a reasonable accommodation. Sure. So I think that ultimately there may be a guidance. And the other thing I'll point out is there are, especially in the health field, there's been mandatory flu vaccines for a long time. What makes this vaccine different is that it was authorized under an EUA, an emergency use authorization, which is a different kind of authorization.
Okay, I want to give some other folks a weigh in here. Christina, what's your reaction to something like this?
You know, I'm with Ameer a little bit on the legal side of this. So I go back to my law school days, and I'm kind of can debate it either way. But I also remember, being a 6-year-old kid, and before I could enroll in school, my mom had to show them my immunizations before I could go to school for everything else, right? Yeah. And now I have 2 babies of my own, and they're on their immunization schedules to be able to go to their schools now, and I have to go every 6 months for the first couple of years of their life to keep up with that. So I don't think it's outrageous that this becomes part of our society. The card and showing the card, I get what you're saying with the symbolism, but I also, again, I'm a small business owner. If I'm responsible for protecting all of my employees, I have to make sure one employee doesn't come in and infect everybody else. So if I require everybody to have it, then doesn't that keep everybody safe?
Amanda?
Well, this is under an emergency use authorization, so it actually hasn't been fully approved by the FDA. And the EEOC did actually say that that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The employers can still require you to get a COVID shot. And so I think that for the cards, they actually want to keep records of which vaccine it is that you're getting, right? And to monitor that. But, with regards to employers requiring it, I think there's obviously the religious exemptions, as we discussed. There are the healthcare workers, the frontline workers, maybe bus drivers, those types of workers that could be required to take it. But there are doctors and healthcare workers that will still refuse to take it. And I think, you could see a new area of legal challenges here. I think people should be able to make the best decision for themselves and their families.
And that'll keep lawyers employed. That's an important thing, right? Our 2 lawyers here. So thank you so much, Amanda, Mackie, Ameer Benno, Christina Antello. And sorry, we've got like 5 seconds. Heather, if you wanted to jump in.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm good.
And Heather Childers, thank you so much, folks, for being with us on this edition of American Agenda. Hope you have a great afternoon. Stay here on Newsmax.